August 2014 was the most critical period in the Russian-Ukrainian war. Ukraine lost more than 700 soldiers only within a month of trying to fight back the forces of the Russian Federation. About 65% of the military hardware was deactivated or destroyed by the end of the summer. Officials faced the scarcity of several types of ammunition. All of this together with economic problems created a difficult situation for Ukraine. Yet even while on the edge of disaster, the country was able to survive by combining diplomatic and military efforts. The combat effectiveness of the army was partially restored a year later in 2015. The front line was stabilized and the intensity of the warfare decreased. The war has changed, obtaining more of an oppositional form, though it has not ended. This is the 64th episode of the series about ATO, History of War. The Russian Federation committed an act of armed aggression against Ukraine in 2014. The war has been ongoing for several years. We're closely following the progress of events, constantly tracing the connection between warfare, diplomacy, politics, and economy. We're trying to understand how it happened and, first and foremost, why it happened. Guerrilla warfare on civilian territories is a crucial element of war. The disruption of transportation can lead to severe scarcity of different hardware in any war zone, which subsequently may result in the weakening of defense. The Russian-Ukrainian war is not an exception to this rule in this particular context. The militants were okay with mining civilian targets, all the while declaring the defense of the civilian population. The Security Service of Ukraine arrested a terrorist group in the Kharkiv Oblast on August 14th, which mined railways and a bridge on the stretch between Kupiansk and Svyatogorsk railway stations. At the same time, the service confiscated a handheld grenade launcher and ammunition. The militants confessed during interrogation that they planned to blow up the train with military equipment and planned more terrorist attacks. On the other hand, military engagement in the ATO zone continued. The declared regime of silence was interrupted 148 times on August 16th, where on 13 occasions the multiple rocket launchers was used, and on 17 occasions heavy gunfire was opened. As a result, in the vicinity of Horlivka, two soldiers of the 57th Brigade, Private Viktor Pronin and Private First Class Katerina Noskova, were killed. The militants bombarded civilian targets in the Azov direction in the evening this same day. About 50 houses were damaged and 3 local residents died during attacks on the villages Lebedinsky and Sartana. The mourning ceremony was declared in Mariupol on August 17th. Members of the OSCE analyzed shell craters and noted that the attacks on the civilian buildings were launched by the militants from the east, with the use of arms with a caliber of 122 and 152 millimeters. The low density of the population of Azov region enabled the terrorists to maintain a high level of secrecy while they set up the firing positions. This factor complicated the shooting, and regardless of many truces, the heavy weaponry was often utilized in the south of the ATO zone. At the same time, in the Donetsk Oblast, the density of urban buildings was higher and the number of observers was greater. This aspect worsened the work of the artillery arms and created conditions for the more active operations of guerrilla groups and snipers. As such, the sniper killed the soldier of the 28th Regiment on August 17th at the checkpoint near Marinka. The frequency of combat operations has decreased since August 18th. The regime of silence was interrupted 82 times, and the artillery was used 4 times. Girl was wounded by rocket shell fragments after the shelling of Marinka. Thanks to the timely response of the military, the child was transported to Dnipro, where she received the necessary medical attention. It is important to note that the armed forces were launching harassing fire from the whole front line during the nighttime period, without mounting any specific attack. No one was killed in the ATO zone, though 2 soldiers died in hospitals from severe wounds. Despite the decrease in activity, the next day was difficult. The terrorists didn't use artillery arms on the northern side of the ATO zone, but the local gas pipeline was damaged due to the bombardment on Stanitsa Luhanska, and one innocent civilian was wounded. 3 Ukrainian soldiers died due to the detonation of explosive devices on August 19th. The members of the 15th Battalion Private First Class Balashov and Lieutenant Kaplanovsky were blown up in the region of Horykhove, while Sergeant of the 54th Brigade Vasil Halas died when his truck was blown up. Simultaneously, the truce was maintained as observed in the Svitlodarsk Bulge on the same day. A decrease in the intensiveness of shootings was observed in the Donetsk Oblast. However, the militants did not hold their fire, having the majority of heavy armaments on the battlefront. As such, Avdiivka came under fire of the multiple rocket launchers Hrad on August 19th. A soldier of the 93rd Brigade died in the area of Opitny. A soldier of the 72nd Brigade was killed in the area of Starohnativka. Terrorists twice fired artillery. Once fired a multiple rocket launcher, and mortars were used 15 times in one day. Overall, Ukrainian soldiers returned fire wherever it was possible. Notably, at the same time, the members of the Security Service of Ukraine arrested 3 militants and confiscated arms and bombs in Kramatorsk. The activity of the terrorist network was blocked in the towns of Konstantinivka and Drushkivka. The members of this network participated in occupying local power structures in 2014 and continued collaborating with the enemies after the liberation of cities by the Ukrainian army. 4 collaborators were arrested, 2 were declared on the wanted list, and 14 units of arms and objects, including gold and a large amount of money in cash, were confiscated. The so-called 36th Humanitarian Convoy, organized by Russian President Vladimir Putin, crossed the Ukrainian border on August 20th. The convoy separated in 2 parts and traditionally moved in the direction of the occupied Donetsk and Luhansk. Overall, the convoy set included more than 100 trucks that brought more than 1,000 tons of different goods. Russian media outlets declared the humanitarian nature of these goods, yet no one saw the actual list. It is notable that parallel to the convoy offload, there was a rotation of military troops. This process distracted terrorists, which had a positive impact on the frequency of bombardments. Small clashes often occurred in the area of Stanitsa Luhanska and Shastya, and Troitsky was bombed 4 times. The militants were typically active near the territory of the Donetsk airport and opened fire several times in the area of Starohnativka. In comparison to previous days, August 20th was a relatively quiet day in terms of shelling. In this respect, one should remember the love of the prodigies of the Kremlin for memorable dates. All special forces of Ukraine were put on advanced military alert to avoid any potential provocations shortly before Independence Day. It is noteworthy that a serious element of a hybrid war is the struggle against the media. In this particular case, this is about the declaration of intent and the demonstration of possibilities. If to speak in simple jargon, if you are preparing for defense and know what to expect from the enemy, then you have to declare it publicly and show readiness for battle. It will force the enemy to change its plans, wasting time and resources. This demonstration of power may even force the enemy to abort the mission. On the other hand, if you're preparing for an attack, it will be appropriate to accuse the enemy of aggressive plans. This specific maneuver will in some way create the illusion of a defensive counterattack, then a planned charge. When your army will start an assault according to a previously devised plan, then with specific information about the operation, the international audience will perceive you as the side that sticks to a strict policy of defense of the country. The Kremlin always practiced these tactics when the provocation was followed by a rightful counterattack. The USSR assault on Finland and Poland, the Georgia invasion, and the Second Chechen operation are on a long list of the implementation of such tactics by Russia. The idea was similar to the moment when the Russian artillery fired at the Ukrainian army that secured the country's border in July 2014. Yet unlike in other moments, the Ukrainian authorities decoded this hybrid plan. and this was the reason that the attempt of the Russian army to invade failed.
Вот так вот весело в городе Гуково, ребята.
The so-called speaker of the DPR, Eduard Basorin, announced the concentration of the Ukrainian military strike group counting on 90,000 soldiers and more than 450 armored vehicles on the line of confrontation. It is important to point out that authorities of the self-proclaimed republics made this declaration with the intention of achieving two goals. Terrorists strived to mobilize and distract the people from the daily hullabaloo of the rotation of Russian forces. Over a year of war, neither the military nor the Russian leaders proposed new versions other than the fear factor of premeditated Ukrainian proponents of Stepan Bandera in the occupied territories of Ukraine. The regime of silence was complied to for quite a long period of time in the Shastya and Stanitsa Luhanska until August 21st. Several shootings were registered in the area of Popasna and Troitske, and military hardware was also spotted in the Pervomaisk area. It was relatively silent in the area of the Svetlodarsk Bulge, where 4 shootings from small arms were registered. At the same time, the militants used artillery and fired at Ukrainian positions on the second line of defense. It was somewhat quiet in the Mariupol direction as well. On the other hand, members of the Security Service of Ukraine neutralized the group of criminals that cooperated with Russian special forces and worked on the establishment of the so-called Mykolaiv People's Republic. The criminals possessed not only firearms but also different agitation materials. It is important to realize that an important element of the work of the Security Service of Ukraine is the prevention of anti-government demonstrations and terrorist attacks. Often this work is not public and usually does not end with high-profile arrests. If a person refused to engage in a terrorist attack, then it will be more effective to recruit that very person. Eduard Basorin said that the Ukrainian army is preparing a provocation, with the aim of accusing the military of breaking the truce on August 23rd. The Ukrainian General Staff made a similar announcement. German Chancellor Angela Merkel, French President Hollande, and Ukrainian President Poroshenko made a common announcement about the Minsk Truce being the fundamental agreement of peaceful regulation of the Donbass conflict during the negotiations in Berlin. These speeches had a hidden meaning. Ukraine held back the enemy in the Donbass without having the possibility to win over Russia with weapons. They aggressively attacked the Kremlin on the diplomatic arena. This work started back in the summer of 2014, but it only gave results within a year. The international reputation of Ukraine had transformed into economic sanctions against the Russian Federation that dealt a serious blow to the aggressor. This, together with the opposition in the war zone, enabled Ukraine to stand up steady and fight for its legitimate rights. Ukraine celebrated 24 years of independence on August 24, 2015. But Ukraine also celebrated 1 year of the actual and true Independence Day, covered in blood and challenged in the war zone. Ukraine lost 81 soldiers on August 2015. In comparison to the tragic events a year ago, the losses decreased tenfold. But this is extremely high in any case. Ukraine remembers each and every one of their defenders, unlike Russia. Ukraine remembers who ensured the safety and lives of its civilian population.